Welcome to Melanie and Kimberlyn Coaching, where we help women recover from and flourish after stress and trauma. Do you ever create a goal and then you can't follow through with it, or someone else suggests a goal or something that you think in your situation, this should be motivating to you, this should be a good goal, and yet you can't follow through with it? And then you beat yourself up because you think, why can't I take action on this goal that it ostensibly should be a great goal for me, something in my situation that I should want to do and I do need to do. Maybe you're looking at goals in the wrong way. Depending on the way we individually react to stress, we can maybe be more successful if we change the way we're creating our goals. Hopefully you remember that we've been doing a couple of different series, one on trauma and one on change, and they kind of are just intertwining between the two of them because the idea of trauma, what it happens to our body, affects our abilities to make the changes that we want to make in our life. So we're going to talk about goals today, and we're going to back up and remind ourselves about how our bodies react to stress, the trauma that it creates in our bodies, and then what that does to our emotions and our mental capacity. I'm going to share my screen, so give me just a moment. Hang on, I don't have my, okay. Sorry about that. Okay, so we're talking about goals, and then we're also talking about the fight, flee, or freeze response. Let's remind ourselves, remember that trauma is not necessarily a big event. It is what happens in your body because of stress that you are feeling. It can be, especially what we're talking about a lot of the times, is daily stress, an environment that is negative, critical, anxiety producing, fearful, unstable, inconsistent, any kind of life like that. And I want to remind you that all of us, because of the pandemic, we all qualify for experiencing a traumatic event in our life. So even if your life is good, you may be experiencing some of these things I'm talking about because of the stress of the pandemic. If you look back over your life, if your life has changed a lot, then you may be experiencing some of these things and you don't understand why, and it's because you have been going through a traumatic experience. And the premise of all of this is that the state of our body influences our behavior, our emotions, and our thinking. So many of the emotions and the mental thinking that we're having and the behavior that comes from that, we feel like this is wrong, this is bad. Now, maybe it causes irritation to someone and it may cause consequences, but these feelings that cause the behaviors are perfectly natural and normal for the state of our body, which is because of the hormones that our brain is pushing into our body because of that stress. If you will remember, hopefully, so as a reminder, if you have not watched the previous videos, I have recorded them and put them on my website, KimberlynCoaching.com. They're on the Springboard tab. There are 4 videos on trauma. I think this is number 6 on the change. And all of these intertwined, they're all about different things that work together. And so if this is interesting to you, but you missed them, please go to my website and watch those, and I think it'll be very helpful to you. So we've talked about several different metaphors for how our bodies and our minds react, how our brain reacts. Remember that the brain wants us to be safe. 2 things: it wants us to be safe, and it wants to be efficient with energy. And so when it feels like we're in danger, it pours these hormones into our bodies, and these hormones cause different things. And as a result of this, there are different metaphors that we have for how for the state that our body is in. When we are not in a state of all these hormones, we say that we are regulated. And when we are in a state that we've been triggered or something has set us off, then we are dysregulated. And this ladder picture gives us a little bit more of an idea. So at the top of the ladder, This is when we're in what we call Bruce Banner. Remember, we've talked about Bruce Banner versus the Hulk. We're in Bruce Banner brain, which is rational and logical and reasonable. Or we've talked about Einstein brain versus Frankenstein. So when we're at the top of the ladder, we're in Bruce Banner or Einstein brain, and we can think clearly. We're social. We can have relationships. We can do goals. We can accomplish our goals. We actually have improved immune functions. It's amazing how much all of this affects our immune system. I read the other day that in women who are in abusive relationships, so 70% of those women have autoimmune dysfunction, and someone said that they had read that it was even higher. So everything in our system is affected by this. So the top of the ladder is where we want to be, but if we have had this lifetime, or even just recently, if we're dealing with stress, we may be in one of these lower levels of the ladder. So in the middle level of the ladder, this is where we are if we're in the fight or the flight response. This is where we have aggression, anger, we may be controlling, we might be sarcastic, threats. This is where we're going to either fight someone, we're going to run away, we're going to flee, we're going to take action. Okay, this is called adaptation, adaptation, and this is where you're actively trying to change your situation. Now, for whatever reason, maybe you tried and it didn't work, or maybe your situation was just too scary that you knew that there was no use. You may end up in the bottom of the ladder, and this is where you're shut down, you numb. This is the freeze area, and you're hiding. You're trying to be small. You're emotionally distanced. You have a hard time making relationships because you don't trust. You want to stay away. Don't notice me. If nobody sees me, then I won't get in trouble. And both of these bottom of the ladder aren't very fun. They're what we want to move out of, only we have, in order to move out of them, it's kind of like, to get a job, you have to have experience, and to get experience, you have to have a job. So in order for us to get out of the bottom levels of the ladder, we have to take some action and make some goals, and it feels like we can't do those well until we're in the top of the ladder. So it feels like one of those cycles, but there are some things that we can do to help ourselves move up. So let's talk about the fight or flight. And now I've talked with y'all about this before, but I know so many people that'll say, I'm feeling this way. I'm feeling angry. I can't concentrate. I can't focus. I can't remember things. Someone the other night said that things that I used to do, that I like to do, don't seem interesting to me anymore. And people will say, am I crazy? No, you're not crazy. What you're feeling is a normal reaction to these hormones that are in your body. And we're going to actually talk about the actual hormones, but let's talk for a minute about these response states. So when you're in fight or flight mode, these emotions listed here are ones that are very likely you can have any or all of them. You feel angry, aggressive, you feel defensive, and reactive, and impulsive, and maybe you feel hostile, and maybe you don't even really know why you feel this way. You just feel it. You can be irrational, and you can be self-centered. When you're in survival mode, it's actually normal to be self-centered. It does not mean that you are a narcissist. If you are worrying that you're a narcissist, then you are not, because they do not worry about it. But everybody has some narcissistic, self-centered tendencies, and if you're in this survival mode, then it is very normal and natural for you to have those sometimes. You might have trouble focusing on things, paying attention. You may have trouble sleeping. You may be fidgety, hyperactive. Sometimes children may be diagnosed as ADHD when really they are actually in trauma because of what's going on in their home. May be abusive, may be unstable, and they are just reacting to that when they get to school and they can't focus at school. And maybe it's really not that they are ADHD. It may be that they are in what we call Hulk mode. So you may have anxiety, irritability, and as children, it may delay you reaching the milestones that you should in your physical, your language, and things like that. So the other response, the freeze, what we call mitigating. So adapting is fleeing or fighting, and mitigating is freezing. So this means we're just trying to not feel the bad feelings. We're trying to avoid them. So you have this feeling of freezing. You have this feeling of being stuck. I can't do anything. You're paralyzed. You can feel dissociated. This is a place where you're trying to numb out emotionally. You're trying not to feel it. So you're self-soothing. This is where addictions come into play. This is where self-injury, people that cut themselves are doing this because the feeling of the cutting helps them not feel the emotional pain that they're experiencing. Suicidality happens here, compulsive behavior. If you're in this response mode, you're reactive, you're impulsive. You're not thinking clearly. You're not thinking clearly in either one of these ways. But here you're emotionally, you're psychologically distancing yourself. Again, in this situation, you're self-centered also. When you're in survival mode, you just are. You're focused in. When I went through some survival times, I could tell that I was starting to move out of them when I was able to start thinking about other things beyond just myself. When I started being able to help other people and think beyond just this little tunnel of where I was, I knew I was on my way out. You're feeling sad with Dawn. You may feel being depressed. I can't get off the couch. I used to enjoy exercising. I used to enjoy walking my dogs. I can't even get motivated to do that now. This is all in the freeze response. You have a reluctance to explore the world. You just want to stay home and chill out. And which we know a lot of people want to do this right now from COVID. But if this is a really big problem for you, this is something you're tired of. You want to move on. So now we've talked about and we're going to talk about them again, the fiery cocktail of hormones that can cause all kind of damage to our bodies and our minds. But we haven't mentioned yet the feel-good hormones. So these are dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. Now all of these hormones make you feel good. They help you be able to learn, feel pleasure. You can create good habits. You enjoy being with people. You can make relationships, connection. One of them, oxytocin, is called the cuddle hormone because it makes you want to be with people and want to interact. Serotonin helps with your self-worth, like feeling part of a group. It helps with your self-image. It enables you to enjoy being with other people. And endorphins make you feel happy, it reduces your pain, calms your anxiety, increases your cooperation, reduces your loneliness. These are all really good hormones, and we want these. We don't want the other ones, but when our brain thinks we're in danger, it pours those fiery cocktail of hormones into our body. There's 30 of them, but we just generally talk about cortisol, adrenaline, and noradrenaline. These are like the major ones that affect us. We talked about this before in the earlier slides, about perfectly predictable and correct biological responses to these hormones. So if you get a lot of noradrenaline, you get that aggression, the assertiveness, hostility. If you get a lot of adrenaline, this gives you the anxiety, the desire to flee, the hyperactivity, makes you want to move. The cortisol, the main thing about the cortisol, look at it, it reduces the dopamine, the oxytocin, the serotonin, and the endorphins. So not only do these hormones pour into you all these negative, hostile, aggressive, irrational ways of thinking, it decreases your happy hormones. So it's kind of like you've got a double whammy there, right? So y'all are probably wondering, what does all this have to do with goal setting and goal creating? But we really do have a point here. Because of your life, because of the experiences that you have had, your brain has developed neural pathways, and we call these procedural memories. We mentioned this before. When you do habits, when your brain creates habits because of the way you do things. So in your life, when you started responding to stress in a certain way, your brain took it this way, your brain developed habits, and your brain has now decided a default for you. Now, we all can do all of the different responses, but you probably have one that you default to. I definitely usually default to fleeing or freezing. I will generally never default to fight. That's not to say that we can't change and move, but you probably have a default. So I'm asking you and suggesting and recommending and encouraging, that's a better word, I'm encouraging you to look, how do you respond typically when you get triggered, stress, anger, or something? Do you generally want to get up there and fight that person? Do you generally want to just run away? Or do you generally just want to freeze? These have been developed through the years. Whenever you do these things, these feel right. Your brain has decided, so let's say your brain has decided that your default is to fight. Then for you, fighting feels right. If your brain has decided that freezing is yours, then freezing is going to feel right. These are very difficult to change until you can actually get at the top of the ladder, like we said, with Bruce or Einstein brains, because the whole purpose of life coaching actually is to become aware, so that instead of just reacting to life, we are responding to life out of choice. We have a hard time responding out of choice when we're in these bottom two levels. So we're getting close to this. If your default is adaptation, fight or flight, so you're kind of in Hulk mode or dragon mode for the most part when you are dealing with stress and trauma, your brain has set your default to that you are going to take assertive, aggressive, hostile action to resolve or control. When you do this, your brain is like, yay, go you! You did the right thing to keep yourself safe, and it rewards you by a dopamine hit. It gives you a hit of the feel-good hormone. So every time you do what the brain thinks you should do, it wants to celebrate, gives you the dopamine, so you will keep doing it. So this is part of why these habits have developed, because when you do them, you feel good. It feels right. If your default is flee, something happens, you run, you get out of the situation, your brain gives you that little hit, and you feel good, and you do it again. Say your default is mitigation, which means to freeze. This means that you're going to do something in some way, you're going to minimize your risk, you're going to minimize the experience, the sensation that is associated with this unpleasantness or this dangerous situation. So when you take whatever action or non-action to minimize and get out of it, your brain says, yay you, send you a little dopamine. So my pictures for this, my metaphors, I want us to have some metaphors to be able to think. We've been talking about Hulk and the dragon all this time, and those are good metaphors for the whole dysregulation, and they're also good metaphors for the adaptation, the fight or flight, the action. But I wanted us to have some metaphors for freezing. So the two that come to my mind, one is possum, right? You've heard of play possum. A possum just falls over and acts dead. Hopefully, if you don't see it, you're not going to eat it. And then when the predator is gone, the possum pops back up. The chameleon just changes color, just adapts to its situation, doesn't do any fighting, doesn't run away, just kind of tries to blend in. I think both of these are good metaphors for the freeze response. So if you are in possum or chameleon mode, you're going to try to minimize risk. Your brain is going to celebrate you're doing that, and it's going to reward you with a dopamine hit. Now, what is the purpose to all this? The thing is, if you're trying to do something different than what your brain thinks you should do, it's not going to celebrate. It's not going to be happy. It's not going to give you the dopamine hit. So let's say you normally freeze. You normally hide, you don't do anything, and you decide, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to, or someone is encouraging you to do something different, to take action. If you do that different thing, your brain is going, whoa, wait a minute, this is not the way we do things. You are becoming unsafe. When your brain thinks you're unsafe, it is not going to give you any dopamine, and it will probably shoot a few more fiery cocktail hormones at you. Other way also, maybe you always fight or flight, and you say, I'm going to chill out. I'm going to just not do anything here. I'm not going to get in the fight. Your brain goes, whoa, wait a minute. The only way you can be safe is to do this fight thing. I know this. This is what my little neurotransmitters are saying. And so it's not happy with you, does not give you the dopamine. So another way to look at this, trying to make this really clear in our brains, is when we think about adaptation, fight or flight, this is like moving towards something. So if this is your default, you can do goals, you can follow up with goals, you can create goals that move you towards something that will work for you. But if your default is to mitigate or to freeze, your way of thinking, or your brain's way of thinking, is you want to move away from something, or you want to avoid something. So if you try to do a goal that's taking you towards something, it's not going to hit with you. It's not going to feel right. You're not going to connect with it, and you're not going to have the motivation or the energy to do whatever that goal is. What can we do about this? There is a way to work with this. So first of all, just remind ourselves, we are all capable of adaptation and mitigation, but we each have a preferred environmental protocol, which means that procedural memory, which means the habit, another easier way of saying it, that we tend to dominantly use. Neither one is wrong. I'm not more wrong because I don't fight. I'm not more right because I don't fight. You're not more right because you do. Neither one is right or wrong. But whatever we're using may not be serving us well. We may want to change, but we can't do it overnight because our brain is going to fight us. Our brain does not want us to change in that way. So we have to do it slowly and kindly and gently to ourselves. So here's some ideas. And if you come up with some examples of this, I would love for you to put them in the comments or email me or let me know. But here's some different ways of thinking about goals. So if we're doing a toward focus, so if you tell the child, if you study hard, they'll get a good grade. That may not be very motivating to them, but if you pass this test, you can avoid summer school. That might be more motivating for someone who is more in this freeze response. If you pass all your classes, you can go to college next year. That's a toward thing. The person you're talking to may not even be able to think of going toward. So how can you help them avoid or go away from? Well, if you pass your classes, you can avoid going to summer school. So if you work really hard at this, you can have a great career. Maybe that's not even in their mind or your mind. But if you work hard at this, your boss won't be angry with you all the time. Or do this so that you can have a new life. Maybe you're so far into the trauma and the abuse that you can't even fathom what a new life would be, but maybe do this to get out of the abuse that you're in right now. Maybe do this so you can have money to travel. Again, maybe your brain can't even think of that because your brain is so bogged down in all the trauma and the stress that you're in. But maybe do this so you won't be evicted from your home. That might be more motivating. Do this so you'll be happy. Again, maybe you can't even fathom being happy. Or do this so you won't be so sad. So to wrap this up, we can change, we can grow, we can accomplish goals, but it can be hard. Today we talked about some of the reasons that you may have trouble with your goals. There's more different reasons, and we've talked about some of them in the past, and we will probably talk about some more going forward. If you would like to work on this more, you feel like you need some help, I would love to work with you. I would like to talk with you. I'm offering a free coaching session I've put the link in the show notes. You can click that link, schedule a free session, and I would love to visit with you, talk with you, help you get going on the right path, and maybe see if you think that we would relate well to work together. Meanwhile, hopefully I've given you some things to think about, some ways to make your life more hopeful, more joyful, more satisfying, and more fulfilling. Have a great week.